After a night at Farina Station, it was finally time to start the Oodnadatta Track. We had about 60 kilometres of bitumen to get to the town of Mari, where the road turned to dirt and we were officially on the Oodnadatta Track. We only had 130 kilometres to the next campsite and the conditions on this section weren't too bad. We had some slippery gravel and corrugated patches, but plenty of stretches that weren't so bad. We just stuck to some wheel tracks and cruised through pretty comfortably. The last 10 kilometres of this section was the worst, particularly for the corrugations, but we eventually made it to the beautiful oasis of Coward Springs. We set up camp and made our way straight to the natural spa. The next morning we stopped at the cafe for some date scones before heading to Williams Creek. This section was super cruisy with no corrugations and plenty of traction. We topped up our fuel, had a coffee and continued on our way. Shortly after Williams Creek, we turned off the Oodnadatta Track to head towards Coober Pedy. From here there was a thin layer of sand over the road, but some short stretches of deeper sand that caused some fishtailing. But we were starting to get comfy and letting the bikes do their thing until my duffel decided to break. So about 20 kilometres after Williams Creek, I had a pretty decent stack. Luckily I'm okay, nothing's broken, and we were able to make it the next 140 kilometres to Coober Pedy. Camera wasn't recording, so I don't have a video, and also the mount for the camera broke in the stack, so I don't have anything afterwards until we get to Coober Pedy. So we were on a pretty sandy part and the bike was getting a bit wobbly and I felt that my duffel moved. So normally when I'm standing with my weight back like you do in sand, the duffel's touching my butt, but all of a sudden it wasn't, and before I knew it I was being flung off the bike and on the ground. So I high-sided, so we dropped down, hit one side, spun around and landed on the other. So most of the damage is on the right side of the bike and the right side of my body, like you can probably see a little bit of a black eye. But we actually picked the bike up from the left side and it had done a 180, was facing the opposite direction to what we were going once we picked it up. I had a bit of a tumble, landed kind of on the right side of my body, rolled onto and over my head, and then landed off the road a few meters away from my bike. Luckily in a soft pile of sand, so this bit didn't hurt as much. Somehow me and the bike came out okay. A little bit sore, bruised. The bike does have some minor problems, like the instrument cluster is kind of bent and wonky. One of the jerrys has a small leak, a few things like that, but it rides fine, the wheel alignment's fine, nothing major, and I was able to ride the rest of the way back. Luckily also, just after we had stood it up again, there were 2 cars going past that stopped to make sure we're okay, and they took the duffel for me because 3 out of the 4 straps holding it on had come off completely, weren't able to reattach, so they carried it the rest of the way to Coober Pedy for us, and we picked it up later. They were also really good making sure I was okay, and they insisted on driving behind us for a while to make sure that me and the bike were okay to keep riding, and after a little bit they overtook us and we met them later on. The camera has come off my helmet, the duffel's not on my bike anymore, I went over my head. Me, I did a roll. Yeah. The biggest damage to the bike is that the whole front end is bent. Most noticeably, the dash and windscreen are pretty wonky, as well as the bars the jerrys are mounted to, and the jerry now has a leak, so we flipped it upside down to keep as much fuel as we can. This is the bottom of the duffel. We have one good one, a broken one, and a completely ripped out one. In more exciting news, we're camping underground. If you aren't already familiar with Coober Pedy, it is an opal mining town providing 90% of Australia's opals. It is also very unique, with 75% of their houses being underground. We spent a few days here resting up and exploring Coober Pedy. We were lucky enough that our campground has an on-site mine tour, and we got to go down and learn all about opals and opal mining.